In this video that shows you a little bit of my Lightroom editing process, I show you how we take this photograph and change it into this, ready for Instagram. Let's dive into it. Just recently, whilst I've been working on other projects, my landscape folder, my library within Lightroom has kind of got away on me a little bit. So today was a day for cleaning that up. But whilst I was in there, I actually realized that I've got some elements within my compositing folder here, which I was going to throw away because I wasn't particularly happy with them looking back at them now. So I've got sky elements, trees, just different things that I've thought over the years might be useful for compositing. Got some astro stuff here as well, but within this section I've got these elements here, and this particular image I thought that it could just be going in the bin, but I thought, what can I do within Lightroom to create a more compelling and, let's say, Instagram worthy image? So in this video, let me take you through a basic edit and see how we can achieve a much more interesting result from this photo. So let's come over to the develop module, and the first thing we're going to do is create a more interesting crop from this. Let's go for a classic Instagram 1:1 crop. So we've got our square here. I'm going to bring this in slightly, so we're going to lead the viewer's eye from this closer mountain here, and I'm also going to bring in the top left corner here just so it's a slightly tighter crop. And if we go with something like that, you can see that this foreground is starting on our bottom third, and we've also got this interesting line of snow here coming from that point as well. So let's double click that and say that is going to be our crop. The first thing I'd like to do is actually change the color profile. So let's come to the browse here and see if we've got something more appropriate. Landscape that is camera matching, that could be quite a good starting point, or perhaps standard. Standard is much more washed out, but let's go with that, and then we can bring in a little more contrast through our control panel here. Let's bring the contrast up. Yep, I like that. And we're going to change the color balance so we've got a warmer image. I feel we're much too far into the greens. This is more of a neutral look, but let's see if we can't warm it up slightly. I really like the idea of a nice warm evening light hitting the mountain here. Now, before I start doing too much in the way of editing here on a global scale, what I actually like to do is come into the localized adjustments and just make some fine tune adjustments. So one thing I'd like to do is darken down the sky. So I've got my burn here, so basically bringing that down from and holding the shift key as I drag that down, we're darkening the sky, and we can also tone the color to more of a blue color in the sky. So let's do that, and that's making our snow at the top of the mountain return to a more natural white color as well, which is quite nice. In the foreground, I love the fact that the sunlight is hitting all over this area here. However, I don't want it to show up too much at the bottom half, because if we have a darker edge to the image, our eye doesn't sort of fall off the edge of the frame. So what I might do here is grab a radial filter, just drag it over, and what I'm going to do is actually just brighten up this area here. I'm going to rotate this by grabbing that point there, and when it turns to that little arrow tool, I can rotate it and now expand it. Let's bring it over so it's covering all of that, and we're going to brighten just this area here. And how I'm going to get it to talk to just this area is come down to the range mask and choose color, grab the eyedropper and just drag this over this whole section here, and there you go. Straight away it leaves the shadows alone now, and we're just brightening the sunlight area, which is great. We could even warm that area up slightly as well, just with the color balance and tint. Now I'm just going to drag up from here, and that's just going to darken this foreground element here and just keep our eye more around this area here, and then leading us up to the top of the mountain along the ridge here. I think I'm just going to make two more adjustments locally, and they are going to be creating a kind of vignette around the edge of this, and then perhaps even creating a fake hazy sunlight coming in from the right hand side just to emulate some nice evening light. So first of all, let's drag this to create our vignette. So at the moment we're darkening the interior of this. So all we need to do is uncheck that invert box, and now we've got a vignette which we can place perhaps the brightest part over the top of the mountain, and then even drag this down slightly. If you want to make your local adjustment larger than the area you can actually see here, all you need to do is change your zoom here. So rather than zooming in to a 1:2 ratio, we can come out further to a 1:8, and now that gives us the option to bring these handles even further if we want to. And so I might bring those out bigger than the picture frame itself, and then just feather that so that it creates a smoother transition towards the middle. So if we delete that, we can see our before and our after, and yep, I quite like that. And now we're going to create this hazy area here. So what I'm going to do is just create a new radial filter coming in from the side. So this is our center off to top right, and at the moment we're darkening everything, which is not what we want. We can double click to reset, and now we can start to build our hazy look. So I actually have a preset for this. This is my AT Sun Flare. If I click that, which isn't looking great at the moment, but we're going to make some slight adjustments. But basically you can see what it's doing here. We're increasing the temperature, which if it's sunlight, that's a pretty good thing to be doing. We can increase the exposure, so it's brightening it. The contrast is actually being reduced, because if you think about when your lens turns towards sun flares and the sun, the contrast in that area is normally reduced. So basically that's what this is emulating. So let's return our zoom to fit into the screen, and let's click off of that so that we don't see any of those points or adjustments. And let's have a quick look at our before and after by using the / key. Before and after. We've certainly got rid of that nasty green cast. We've given the image a sense of warmth and a much more inviting feeling to it. So let's see what else we can do. Let's bring the exposure up just ever so slightly, maybe something around the +24. If you want to make fine adjustments, all you need to do is just hover over the slider with your mouse, and then you can actually use the keyboard to tap up and down on the arrow keys, and that will actually increase and decrease by plus and minus 10. So let's just go to +19 at the moment. I'm happy with that. Now the usual thing that I'll be doing when I start working on something is bring the highlights down and bring the shadows up just a little bit. I can then work on the contrast more by bringing the blacks down and bringing the whites up. But if you look at the top of the mountain here, as I bring those whites up from that 0 point, it starts to bleach out pretty quickly, because at the moment we've got a nice kind of peachy orange color up there, but as we push beyond that, it just bleaches out completely and looks overexposed. So let's bring that back to 0. Happy with that. Because this is a nice landscape with a lot of detail, I think a bit of clarity being brought in there will actually really help this image along. You know, we can be quite forceful with that. That's quite nice. Let's try the dehaze as well. Okay, that's really nice. It's saturating the colors. If we go all the way, you can see what it's doing. Saturating the colors and dropping the blacks down as well. So I mean, it's a nice look, but we don't want to do too much of that. You could also see up here we had a little lens spot as well, which we can correct. We can use the healing brush tool, and I use the bracket keys just to reduce the size. The left bracket key, click once, and that's taken care of that. At this point I feel the image is getting a little oversaturated, so I might bring the dehaze back down just ever so slightly. These changes below this point are just going to be subtle little changes. Tone curve I'm actually going to use for actually color toning the image, and I'll show you how I do that in just a second. First of all, I'm just going to bring the saturation down ever so slightly. Let's see what playing with the vibrance does. I might pop the vibrance up, bring the saturation down to there, and now let's come into the tone curve. From here we can create a customized look, and we're going to try and wash out the shadows just ever so slightly. We're going to lift the blacks, we may bring down the whites slightly, and we're going to give it a blue in the shadow, warm yellow in the highlights look, and I'll show you how we do that. So first of all, let's deal to the contrast of the image. So if we bring this left slider up, I'm just going to lift those blacks ever so slightly, maybe somewhere around there, and I'm going to bring the whites down a little bit as well, not too much. And now let's bring a little bit of contrast into the image. I'm going to bring the shadow point down, maybe start to bring the midpoint up just ever so slightly. Yep, I'm happy with that. Let's leave that there for now. And we come into the blue channel, and this is where our color toning will start to take shape. If we lift the blues on the left here, that's going to introduce blue into the shadow. And if we bring the highlight point down, that's going to introduce yellow into the highlights. I'm liking that, but it's a little too yellow, so I might complement that by adding just a smidge of red to the highlights. So rather than taking away the blue and introducing yellow like we did before, rather than taking away the red, which will shift it towards green, cyan, we're actually going to boost that up ever so slightly, take it to the left, and that will introduce red into the highlights, so we're getting a more of an orange look rather than yellow. Let's turn that off and on just to see the change that we've made. If we want to make fine-tune adjustments, we can do that. Currently, I feel like we've got some really nice detail in this area here and also in the foreground here, but I feel like we're losing interest just around here. That may not bother some of you. Personally, I'm just hoping I can add a little bit more interest here. So I will drag a radial gradient over that, and it keeps defaulting to the last gradient I used. But in this case, what we want to do is reset that, and let's play with the clarity. That's going to darken down those shadows even further. But now if we bring the shadows up, we're going to brighten it and get the benefit of that clarity, that added clarity, the detail and the contrast in and around there. Now let's try a little bit of texture in there as well, and I'm going to call that done. I'm going to export that for Instagram, and if we look at our before and our after, we've taken an image that personally I was ready to put this in the bin. I wasn't that impressed with it. I shot this quite a few years ago, wasn't in love with it, but now with our edit, I'm liking it. Once I've made my overall adjustments, I'd just like to do one last pass within the treatment panel and just make some minor tweaks just to make sure I'm happy. So in this case, I think I want to increase the contrast even further. I'm going to boost the blacks up ever so slightly. By double clicking them, it just resets any of these sliders to 0. And I'm just going to increase the saturation once again. And I may just bring the color temperature back down just ever so slightly. It's just giving us a richer blue to the sky, which is a nice complement to the oranges we've got going on in the foreground. So I'm really happy with that. I'm going to say done. Here's our before, here's our after, and the very last thing I like to do just to check that I'm happy with the image is just see what it looks like against a couple of different backgrounds. So I'll press F to go full screen. I will right click. Here we've got black. We saw it against medium grey before, and I'll also check it against a white background as well. Give it a once over visually and say, yes, I'm happy with that. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed this short video just showing a little insight into the way I edit my photos. If you're interested in following my landscape photography work, check me out on Instagram. My Instagram name is New Zealandscapes. Love to see you there. Cheers for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next video.